Really? Only 10? Narrowing Shawn Michaels' body of work down to just 10 must-see matches is a difficult enough task in and of itself. You're no doubt omitting a bunch of 4.5-star epics, a few 4 3/4-star epics, and then what do you do when you're down to just 10, the best of the best? Then you have to rank them, of course, don't you? That's kind of what we do here. But then what will be number 1 on Michaels' opponents list might only be 8th or 9th on HBK's. That is just the level of performer that Shawn Michaels was, and you know what, probably still is, actually. But then you have to remember this. This will be a top 10 unlike any other. Shawn Michaels earned the nickname of Mr. WrestleMania for his Pantheon-level performances on wrestling's most-watched stage, but he was just as much of a squared circle virtuoso for events with various different names as well. Few wrestlers, arguably no wrestlers, have ever blended charisma, science, timing, presence, showmanship, athleticism, and all of the little intangibles of a main event star quite like the Heartbreak Kid. This list reflects the really high standards that come with a Shawn Michaels match. Any of them that you've never seen are obviously required viewing. And even if you have seen them before, then just watch them again. You can't watch Shawn Michaels matches enough times, and that is especially true for his greatest matches ever. So without further ado, I'm Jack from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 Shawn Michaels matches you need to see. Join us. Number 10, Shawn Michaels versus John Cena on Raw, April 23rd, 2007. Now, in the opinion of quite a lot of us here, WWE's best match in the United Kingdom will always be Bret Hart versus Davey Boy Smith at SummerSlam 1992, but there is absolutely no shame in being second to that. The safe bet for second place would be the night that Michaels tangled with the reigning WWE champion on the champion's 30th birthday before 12,000 rabid fans in London's Earl's Court, and it easily ranks among Cena's finest matches ever. And hey, it ranks among Shawn's finest matches ever too. For one thing, this match is never once boring across its 56 minutes of duration. Yes, 56 minutes. That's right, a near 1 hour match on Raw between a 41-year-old 23-year veteran and a wrestler that often earns criticism for not being able to wrestle, and it at least borders on 5 stars. That's one good thing about John Cena. You can put him in there with an all-time great and he never looks out of his depth. He always holds up his end of the bargain. The great in question that night was, of course, Shawn Michaels, and the magic they made was absolutely off the charts. Number 9, Shawn Michaels versus Mankind in Your House Mind Games. How's this for a description? Best match in wrestling history that didn't have a decisive finish. We think that fits the bill with this match pretty accurately. But even a disqualification finish couldn't put a dent into the brilliance pieced together by Michaels and Foley that night in Philadelphia. Mick Foley would write that he considered this the greatest match of his entire career, and when you remember how many classic matches Foley took part in, that's some high praise indeed. This was a really good clash of character and style, as wily and confident technician Michaels matched up with the unpredictable and vicious sociopath Mankind for a match that saw moments of role reversal at times as well, as Mankind worked to out-wrestle Michaels at times, while the reigning WWF champion tried to match Foley in heartless brutality. This match also has a number of visual shocks, from Mankind's hangman spot to the table superplex crash to Michaels' leaping superkick off of a chair. It's both spotty and psychologically sound all at once, a real testament to the versatility of two awesome performers in the primes of their careers. Number 8, Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho, No Mercy 2008. When you think of ladder matches, you'll probably think of stunt shows that are part Cirque du Soleil, part Jackass, and part elaborate game of Mousetrap. There's lots of stunts, lots of danger, and lots of excitement. But a ladder match doesn't always have to be so frenetic and spotty. When you factor in the feud between Jericho, who by now was the World Heavyweight Champion, and Shawn Michaels in 2008, pure hate could actually override the zaniness. Every single spot involving the ladder here has "I'm going to effing kill you" written all over it, from Jericho having his tooth knocked out on a ladder seesaw spot, to Jericho deftly kicking the conveniently positioned ladder squarely into Michaels' face, recalling the eye injury from earlier that summer. It was a ladder match that really told a story, paying off months of bitterness, acrimony, and the need for revenge that exists, you know, in every person's heart, no matter how nice they may actually be. Michaels has always been a tremendous storyteller, and he and Y2J wrote an epic novel over the course of several months. This vengeful battle was their collective masterstroke. Number 7, Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle, WrestleMania 21. This is a real case in point regarding the introduction to this video. You might be one of those people that puts Michaels versus Angle number 1 on Shawn's list, or you might be one of those people who puts it number 1 on Angle's list, or on an all-time list, or anything like that, and nobody would begrudge you for a second. And yet, because we're dealing with Shawn Michaels here and there are so many excellent matches flying around, in this instance, it sadly does fall outside the top 5. But as far as Michaels versus Angle goes, it's even better when you realise that these two, who'd never wrestled each other before, rehearsed only one spot ahead of time, the Angle Slam into the Sunset Flip counter. The rest was one untouchable pro making magic with one of his few real peers, two men who could realistically be considered two of the greatest of all time, and it deserved every accolade that it got. This was one of those bouts where you could have called 5 stars well in advance and bet your soul on it, because Michaels and Angle are just hardwired to overachieve in a wrestling ring every single time. Number 6, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker, WrestleMania 26. Whether you think this match is better or worse than Michaels Taker at WrestleMania 25, the general consensus seems to be that whichever is the inferior of the two, it's not actually inferior by more than an inch or two. The hotly debated consensus here is that this match was a second place, but not a dishonourable second place at all. If you ranked the greatest matches of Undertaker's 3-decade career, this is easily inside his top 3, maybe even his top 2, and for some people, it's his greatest match ever. While the action meets the lofty standards expected of two true icons, the drama and tension are what stand out the most. Michaels wagered his very career against Undertaker's streak. The possibility of this being Shawn's last match really does gnaw at your nerves the deeper into the fight they go. It's a more athletic, harder hitting version of Michaels' match with Ric Flair 2 years earlier, and it's just as devastating when Michaels gets buried by WWE's Grim Reaper. It was about as flawless a match as a man could go out on. If only he did go out on it, but we'll save that until we see what happens next. Number 5, Shawn Michaels versus Triple H versus Chris Benoit, WrestleMania 20. Shawn Michaels has spilled more blood than a clumsy vampire, but man, does he leak the crimson stuff in this one. People talk about Eddie Guerrero's terrifying blade job from Judgment Day the very same year, but you can definitely make a case that Michaels' blade job here is in the very same neighbourhood. Not that the blade job was the real story of this match, the drama of Benoit's title chase and the creative double teams and breakups are what make this one of the greatest triple threats of all time. It can be really hard to pull off an effective triple threat due to the cliched spells of one guy playing dead on the outside for 3 hours until conveniently waking up in time to break up a pinfall, but the tension on display in this match really supersedes those conventions. Michaels, Helmsley and Benoit each possessed enough timing and instincts to really make the format work, and the result was a cathartic WrestleMania ending with all parties more than carrying their own weight. Number 4, Shawn Michaels vs Triple H, SummerSlam 2002. Best comeback match of all time? Even the biggest HBK supporter had to have slightly reduced expectations when Michaels returned from a 4-year layoff to do battle with friend-turned-enemy Triple H. Surely in his first match back, Michaels could maybe hit 3.5 stars, 4 stars, whatever, but expecting him to be the alpha and omega of wrestling perfection was just absurd, wasn't it? But now we know better than to doubt Shawn Michaels inside a wrestling ring. What was said about Michaels' storytelling ability here is epitomized with this bloody brawl, the ideal combination of a WWE hardcore match and an old John Wayne Western. Seeing classic gunslinger Michaels heroically step up to the big bully that was once his protege and knock him down several pegs was beautiful theatre, and made you believe once more in Michaels as a transcendent talent. All he needed was one match to remind us just who the hell he was. Number 3, Shawn Michaels vs The Undertaker, Bad Blood. All things have a beginning, including colossal steel cage based stipulations. And as far as the best Hell in a Cell matches go, it's pretty hard to beat the original, although there have been some contenders that have come along over the years, but this match was really innovative. And yes, we really enjoy Mankind's multiple brushes with death and Brock Lesnar's blood-soaked slugfests, but it's hard to top the night that Shawn Michaels was nearly beaten to death by an angry zombie mortician. That was the beauty of Shawn Michaels. He could be so hateable, so cocky, so contemptible a bad guy that him getting ripped to shreds could be so much fun to watch. And that is exactly what happened as Undertaker swung the tide of a competitive match his way, reducing Michaels to a barely mobile vessel of caked blood and dilated pupils. This was a match of well-defined characters and a spectacle that just kept on building, and even 21 years later, it's still one of the greatest Hell in a Cell matches of all time. Shawn Michaels would die for his art, and here, he just about did. Also, it kind of featured one of the best debuts of all time, maybe even the best, so go and watch it right now. Number 2, Shawn Michaels vs Razor Ramon, WrestleMania 10. Some younger fans don't understand what's so special about this match, and that's a real shame. In 1994, you just didn't see matches like this, as the ladder match was still years away from being a regular part of main roster stipulations. Razor and Shawn's ladder match was a necessity, as their dispute over who the real IC champion was meant that 2 belts would hang high above Madison Square Garden, and only one man could pull them down. This match would prove influential for every crazed stunt show of its type that would follow, and yet there's an even even keel and clear control throughout this Mania 10 clash. Yes, Michael bumps around like a pinfall off of every drop and blow from the ladder, but the match is always about the race to the top, and it never loses sight of that. This is an absolute masterclass in how to balance a competitive match and all the psychology that goes with it, with a more modern spot fest that really shows off some wild and crazy bumps. It's also one of those matches that really separated Shawn Michaels from the pack, and one of the reasons that he deserves every positive label that he gets. And number 1, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker, WrestleMania 25. To many, this was peak WrestleMania, and arguably the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. This was two wrestling gods in their early to mid 40s squaring off in something that lent strong authority to that showcase of the Immortals nickname that gets bandied about often at WrestleMania. For this match, it was especially fitting. Even with Undertaker just about breaking his neck halfway through on that terrifying dive to the outside, calling this match flawless is a pretty accurate statement. There was a real respect that the two commanded with this performance as the Houston crowd watched on with collective awe, understanding that what was happening in front of them was going to be hard for anyone to duplicate. The near falls, the genuine drama, and the subtle storyline ticks make this match worth every ounce of love it gets. So come on, Dave Meltzer, give it that extra quarter star it deserves, please. So that's our list. Have we missed off any of your favourite Shawn Michaels matches? Yes, we almost certainly have. There's way too many to pick from. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to Jack the Jobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic, and check out our Patreon too at patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, to join us.